Thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thursdays are usually a little stressful for students on campus, so they might trickle in later since it's the day before the final day. I just touched something. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker. Ingrid, close enough, is a Danish theologian, author, and cultural leader dedicated to the legacy of N.F.S. Grundtvig, democracy and popular education. She serves as head of the Grundtvig Academy at the NGO Grundtvigist Forum, the Grundtvig Association, based at the historic site Vartov in Copenhagen, Denmark. Educated in theology at Copenhagen University, her scholarly and public work centers on the thought and legacy of N.F.S. Grundtvig, the 19th century Danish pastor, poet, and philosopher whose ideas helped shape the folk school movement and modern democratic culture in Denmark. As an author, Ingrid has written books and numerous articles exploring Grundtvig's theology, the foundations of democracy, and the role of education in fostering active citizenship and community. Through her leadership at the Academy, she contributes to public debate, organizes lectures and seminars, and works to keep Grundtvig's ideas relevant in contemporary society. She is a passionate advocate of communal singing, an essential part of the Danish folk high school and Grundtvigian tradition. Ingrid sees shared song as a powerful expression of community and enlightenment. Welcome, Ingrid.
And hello, everyone. We talked about whether it should be formal or non-formal, and it's actually not supposed to be formal. It's just that I want to show you some pictures, so that's why I'm standing up here. So it's not formal, but I have some pictures I want to show you. And I have to warn you as well that I hope in the end we'll sing a song together as well. Even though we're not that many people, I hope we'll do it anyway. It is in English, not in Danish, so I hope we can do it. I have to stand close to the this is my third presentation this week. The first two has been together with Sune, who I didn't know beforehand, so it has been quite an experiment, and a good experiment, the two of us presenting together. And I think we both had good fun, not knowing what the other one was going to say, so it was good fun. Today I only have myself, but hopefully you will join in and comment or ask questions or whatever you feel like. And I mean, we've had different topics from one day to the other, and I'm not sure whether you've been to all three, but you can say the first one that I was part in was about the origins of the idea, the origins of the folk school idea. So we kind of look backwards, and then yesterday we're looking at the present and saying, well, how and why is this relevant today? What kind of, what to talk about today when we look at the world today. And then today I will focus a bit on translation, not necessarily or not just translation from one language to another, but also translation from one culture to another. So it's not just language, but also the attempt to take an idea that was grown in one part of the world and then moving it to another part of the world, like this place is. And that's something that I'm very much engaged in, not in the US so much, but in other parts of the world. And there are similarities, even though of course it's a new place all the time, but there are similarities in the struggles that there are transferring one thing to another situation. And I wanted to wear this t-shirt, but I thought it was a bit stupid because I got it from Dawn Murphy, who is the former vice president at the Folk School Alliance. So I didn't bring it because I thought it was a bit stupid taking it here, but I quite often actually wear it when I talk about translating Grundtvig, because I think it's just splendid for talking about that. Some of you probably know this, teachers. I thought maybe you would all be wearing it in my suitcase, but you're not. But I know that you have this cup or thingy.
Stickers, I have the t-shirt.
It's a sticker, yeah, on your, where it says folk means people. And that is really key in a way. I mean, because there are difficulties translating. Of course there are. It's always difficult. I mean, it's difficult when you try to translate Dostoevsky to Danish, and it's always difficult, and there's always something missing. When you take work that's written in one language and in one culture and context, and then you move it, of course there's always something that is missing. On the other hand, and this has really been my a thing that I stick to, there's also something gained. And actually there's something gained just in the struggle to find the right word. There's something gained. And sometimes translation is quite a creative process as well, so some things happen when you translate. But there are many problems. And one of the problems with translating Grundtvig relates to the word folk school. What to do with that? And in Danish it's called Folkehøjskole, and maybe the direct translation would be folk high school, but then you think of a high school maybe, and that's not what you're supposed to think of. And then also that's the word folk, which, I mean, I don't know who came up with the idea for this t-shirt, but it's just fantastic because there's a problem here with the word folk. Even though in Danish it's the same word, but it has a different meaning. So when you talk about folk in Danish, you can mean both what you might think of here as something regional, something a bit traditional maybe, something connected to, it could be folk art, folk music. Whereas when you talk about it in Danish, it's that as well, but it's also people, I mean citizens, people of a nation. So it has more than one meaning, and that's a bit sad in a way, because then you don't get the double meaning of it, because and that's maybe something that me and Sune have tried to talk about as well, that there are two things important. I mean, there are 100 things, but two things important in the folk school tradition. One is the rootedness, the connection to local culture or history or language or songs. But another thing is becoming a citizen, taking a democratic responsibility, being an empowered person who can engage in society. So and that's really, I think, the double meaning of the word folk. But then problem solved, because now these t-shirts are there, and then we can, I mean, that's the point. Folk means people, or it means folk and people, and that's just it. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not going to, because we've done that, I'm not going to go back and into a lot of Grundtvig, but just to in a way indicate why is it difficult to translate Grundtvig. As I said, it's always difficult to translate something, but maybe he's exceptionally difficult. Not just because you could say all this about him, that he's a theologian, historian, mythologist, poet. He actually wrote around 1,600 songs. I mean, it's really, and some of them have 20 verses. I mean, so it's like a huge amount of words. But other than that, he's also very much connected to Denmark and to what is Danish. And when you talk to people in Denmark about international work with Grundtvig, they're like, well, is that even possible? Do there really exist folk schools outside of Denmark? Because this is so much connected to the Danish identity, the Danish mentality. So can it actually be possible to move that out to a different setup? And because I mean, he was very much engaged in the whole construction, you can say, of a Danish identity. So people connect him very much, or many people at least, connect him very much with something very Danish. However, what I meet when I go around to different places in the world where people are inspired by his thoughts, they actually, in a way, they do it the right way, even though I wouldn't say, I mean, there isn't the right way, but they do it the right way, in the sense that they think, well, it's not a question of adapting something Danish, but it's the question of getting close to something rooted. I mean, to be rooted where you are. So that is the point, and the respect for something local or something that is close to your heart, that is really in a way the point. So in that sense, I think of course it is possible to move it out, but it's not a question of copying something that is original, but it's more connecting to something. I haven't been, I mean this is the first time visiting a folk school in the US, but so I don't know, and in that way it's a bit rude of me to say this, but I heard about some of the schools that were more kind of Danish, and it seems to me to be a bit problematic in a way, the schools in the US, because they kind of, I mean there's a risk of turning into a museum in a way. There's a risk of turning into something that's just trying to copy something, and I think it's quite important not to. And actually you could say it's Grundtvigian not to. so in that way it's quite good. Okay. I just want to tell you a little bit about the work that I'm doing with translating Grundtvig, because it's something that has been going on for quite some years now. This work with Grundtvig internationally, and one of the things that we work with is this book. It's a book by a person that I think has been here actually last year, N.F.S, who's a Grundtvig scholar at the University in Copenhagen, and he's written this introduction to Grundtvig, the essential N.F.S Grundtvig, and many people before him have done that as well, because Grundtvig is quite essential in Denmark, but I often recommend this one as a place to start, because it comes around a lot, and it also has examples of Grundtvig's own writing, so I think it's a good way to get into it. And this one is in English, and there's a Danish one that was the first one as well, but then after the English one came out, then these projects came along as well. So this is a translation in Bengali that came out in 24, I think. And there's the English one, and this is a German one, and this is a Japanese one. And I mean, I'm not part of this in the sense that I can all these languages. I'm part of it in the sense that I'm trying to find the funding for it, trying to find the right people to translate it, and help the process, and also help with the promotion of it. And that has been really interesting to work with this. And we still have some books waiting. We have a manuscript in Arabic, and we have a manuscript in Korean. So this is quite fascinating, I think, these talks with these people. I don't speak their languages, but we can talk about difficulties anyway, difficulties with the word folk school, or the word folk church, or the other words that are difficult. And that is really interesting. And for me, it's really a gift, because I realize the difficulties, and I also get into these very interesting talks about, well, what is in this word, and how to open it up, and what does it actually mean. And sometimes you realize, well, I've been using this word for ages, but I didn't really get that much into it, but you do when you have to struggle with it. So in that sense, I think it's really a win, again. And then I thought, because this thing about translation and talking and speaking in another language, as I do now, speaking in another language than your own. I mean, sometimes it can feel a bit like, I mean, you feel a bit dumb when you're not speaking your own language, I have to tell you. Because constantly I'm missing something I can't say. I know I want to say, but I can't say it. And I even understand more than I can say. So it's like I understand most of what you say, I think. But I'm really searching for a word constantly. I could say this in Danish if you could understand it. So that's how it is. You feel a bit like frustrated because I can't say what I want to say, and I think that's how it is to be speaking not your own language, constantly think, I wish to say this, and that's something really to cry about. So I thought, I mean, maybe we can ask ourselves this question: should we start crying? Because it really is the question, because you really constantly feel frustrated. And I think, I mean, for English, at least in many European countries, English is a language you learn, I mean, when you're very little, and it's used constantly. I mean, we constantly speak English in many situations, also at I mean, in many situations. So, but it's very often it's a bit. I mean, we're a bit less clever because we constantly. I mean, we can't have all the nuances that we have when we speak our own languages. So we feel a bit dumb, or we are maybe a bit dumb. And that's, I mean, that's what can happen also the other way around, that when you translate the thoughts of Grundtvig into a new context, then it can become Grundtvig light in a way. So it can become a bit sort of superficial, that you just take, oh, this thing about happiness, oh, that's lovely, we take that, or this thing about equal relationship between teacher and student, that's wonderful, we take that, and then it can become a bit sort of superficial in a way. I mean, there's a risk of that. On the other hand, and that's really what I think from working with all these translations, that you can also go the other way around and say, let's make it even more difficult. I mean, even more complicated than when you just know the language, because you have to do this double thing, like saying both folk and people, and a lot more work actually than when you just have one language. So that's my recommendation when you work with something that you translate. Make it difficult, because that's where it gets interesting. Yeah. And I'm just going to show you one example of something difficult, and that is the song that I warned you about, because this is a song in Danish. It's called Lyset for de lærte blot, and I know of two translations of this song. Maybe there are even more, but I know of two of them, and this is one of them, and I'm in doubt which one I prefer. But now I've taken John Mason's here, and it's in the Danish folk high school songbook. It's a quite popular one, and it's actually also in the little English one that I gave to you. And there are some problems, and I'm just going to show you the problems. But there are also some fantastic things that John Mason came up with. Grundtvig didn't write it, but it's quite good anyway. So that's also the interesting thing about this translation. The song is from 1839, and it's really an interesting time in history, because it's a time where people in Denmark are aware of the fact, they know that things will change. At the time, it's an absolute monarchy, so there's a king who is in charge. However, everyone knows that this is not going to last, so it's kind of obvious that things will change, and that's something there's a lot of talk about, and also there's awareness that people need to grow up in a way, need to become more responsible, because things are going to change, or at least that's what Grundtvig thinks, that they need to grow up, and they need to learn more, they need to be ready for the change. And then he writes this song about enlightenment, or about education, or about, well, how to approach education. And today I think we can't hear how provoking in a way it is, because he's actually attacking the fact that at the time there was really a great sort of division between people of Denmark. There were the people who spoke Latin and went to university, and that was a few, and then there were the rest of the people who didn't, and that was really, I mean, the general opinion was that education was for those people who spoke Latin and not for everyone, so that was the general opinion. And what it says in Danish, it doesn't say anything about books in the first line, but it says something about scholars or the learned people. So it's light only for the learned people, the people who speak Latin. And then in the Danish version, the second line starts with a no. So it's quite obvious what Grundtvig thinks is enlightenment only for people who speak Latin? No. So he's trying to say, well, we need to change our approach to education and our approach to who are the people. And this version is focusing more on the books, which in a way, I mean, I think it's a bit hard to say that Grundtvig wasn't, and I also think it's a bit wrong actually, to say that Grundtvig didn't like books. I mean, he wrote lots and lots and lots of books, and he read lots and lots of books, but he was suspicious of this idea that you can just sit down and read and learn. Like when you walk around here, people learn in many ways, and they learn from experience, they learn from each other, and they learn from life. And that was maybe his point more than, I mean, he didn't say you need to throw away the books, but you need to read them as a living person. And if you don't, then you don't get anything out of them. So you need to be alive in a way to read a book. Otherwise it doesn't give you anything. Okay. But the part of this translation that is problematic in my point of view, and that's, I mean, you don't have to agree, but it's just in my point of view, is that in the third verse, there's something really important in the Danish text, because Grundtvig is saying something about misuse or abuse. You can say misuse, maybe would be the word. And when we talk about that today, I mean, people in Denmark, they think it sounds old-fashioned as well, so it's like it's a bit difficult to understand in Danish as well, because what is this kind of misuse? Misuse of what? What is it? I mean, and what he's talking about is misuse of freedom. You can misuse your freedom. And it's not any freedom, it's a freedom to think and speak and believe. So it's the freedom you have to express yourself and to meet with other people and agree or not agree about something. So it's a freedom to use your spirit, your mind. And this is something that you can misuse. You can use it in a destructive way or a stupid way. And he's asking what to do with that, because in a sense he's quite realistic. He's saying that will happen. Sometimes people misuse their freedom. So what to do with that? And then he says, well, we can choose to have more regulation and control. I mean, that would be a choice to do. Say, well, some people say stupid things. We should maybe stop it. Say it is not allowed. We should kind of stop that from happening. Saying we have to reduce the room for speaking up. That could be one way of going. And then he's not making us think very long about that, because he says, no, that's a bad way to do it. We have to, in a way, insist that, well, okay, that's part of life, that people misuse their freedom, but if we want freedom, we have to take that in as well, and then say, okay, we can disagree, but hopefully we can use the freedom for something good as well. And I think that's quite important. So in that sense, I'm a little bit annoyed with John Mason here, because he's taken something out. It doesn't really say in verse 3 in that sense. And I think it's an important one. It has something to do with what kind of society we want. Yeah. So that's how it is with translation. However, he also has something very beautiful, I think. Because if you look at verse 5, there's something about enlightenment's a quest we share. It weaves us in a rainbow. It shines more clear the more we care, till starlight sinks in shadow. And then it says in the first line, it says, enlightenment is meant for all, and knowledge gained through giving. And Grundtvig didn't write that either, but I hope, and I think he meant it, and I think it's really quite perfect. It fits very well what you do here, I think, and what people do at the high school, and it actually fits very well Grundtvig writes in another writing. So in that sense, I think maybe John Mason just added something that is important here. And that is just, I think that is basically how it is with translation, that some things are added and some things are lost. Okay, so I think at the end of this, I hope you will join me in singing this. I will help you learn it, but that is my plan. So if you want to avoid this, you should leave before the end. But this is my plan, that we should sing this song. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is not translating words, but translating an idea from one culture to another, and that is really a work that is alive, and I just wanted to show you some photos from a folk high school in Poland that I've been visiting a couple of times the last couple of years. It's called Gzibod, and that's probably not pronounced correctly, but it's an organic folk school close to Warsaw, and it's focusing on agriculture, and it's been there for a long time. But the leader of it, Eva, who's standing up there, looking very thoughtful, is really a fantastic person who's developing this school, but also developing programs for other people who wants to make a school, start up a school. So she both has students coming there, but also people who wants to go to other parts of Poland and start up new projects. So in that sense, I think it's really fantastic what she's doing, and the school has the same combination as you in a way have here, looking back and working with old traditions of I mean, this is particularly farming, but at the same time it's very modern. So it has this kind of combination between looking back and using the old traditions, the traditional ways of gardening and farming, but at the same time it's a modern place that is in contact with the world. So I think it's just wonderful. And I try, that's me down here with my fantastic team. I try to help out in a way because Eva is very interested in somehow connecting to, well, what is this Grundtvig tradition and how can we incorporate that in our work? So I try to help out, and I brought with me both a person who's teaching folk school teachers in Denmark, so he's constantly working with new teachers in Denmark, and I also brought a person who's a musician, so that we can introduce traditions of morning singing, etc., and things like that. And then the fantastic thing, I think, is that, I mean, Poland and Ukraine are neighbors, and there also are people coming from Ukraine, and actually the last 2 or 3 years there have been 2 startup schools in Ukraine as well. This is Sergei up there, he's teaching us a song, and he's the principal at a school in Ukraine. And I haven't been there because it's a war, but I'm in contact with them and trying to help out. And I mean, they are working with a folk school on very different conditions than you are here and than we are in Denmark. And it's this whole combination of trying to act normal and have morning assemblies and have debates about poetry or whatever, and then also have first aid and all these kind of things. So it's just fascinating to follow and to try and help out. This is I took this on purposefully. This is from Warsaw Folk School. So this is one of the 2 folk schools in Ukraine. And Sergei is also interested in kind of connecting with tradition, and I try to help as best as I can. This kind of working with translation of a concept that is connected to Scandinavia, but then it has to change, of course, to a country that is different and a lot bigger as well, and has different, of course, very different problems. And one of the things that I found out, and I think I said that in one of the other presentations here as well, is that it's a good thing to tell about the start of difficulties in Denmark, because people actually feel a bit, it's kind of comforting to hear about how difficult it was, and not just to hear about, oh, there's so many schools today in Denmark and they're supported by the government and blah, 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 and young people go all the time, and that's fantastic, but it's also the result of many, many years. So it's more interesting, I think, for these places to hear about, well, the first schools, I mean, they were gathering together money, as the story is about this school, and some of the schools, I mean, they're just hoping there would be more than one student coming, and things like that, and I think, and also that there are many, many schools in Denmark that started up and then shut down again. Which is also the story, that some of the schools are very old, but some of the schools are very new, and some of the schools are not there anymore. Also the schools that Olive Campbell and Marguerite visited, some of the schools are there still, but some of the schools are not existing anymore, and that's, I mean, that's how it is as well, that some of them are struggling to survive. And I've just found out, because I've talked to many of these people, that all of a sudden people lighten up when I tell about the failures. So I think it's just, I mean, in a way, I understand why, because I mean, what to do when you're in Ukraine and you want to have something like that, but it's like, well, I mean, things are a bit different. But this is things that are happening right now, and I. From where I sit in Copenhagen at the Grundtvig Academy, I really meet and get emails and are in contact with lots of people from different parts of the world who is interested in this kind of educational concept and then they go and do it in very many different ways, and I think it's just wonderful. Yeah. And part of this project, the project in working together with Eva in Poland and the people around her, is that we're working on something that we've been calling the manual. And it's not a manual, but we call it a manual. And it's not going to be called a manual when it's published. It's going to be called Education Brings Hope. But because there shouldn't be a manual, so it's very important that it's not a manual for how to make a folk school, how to be a folk school teacher, and Jonas, who's up here, who's a teacher for folk school teachers in Denmark, he was very like, we can't call it a manual because it's very important that you don't tell people that there's a recipe for this. I mean, you can't follow a manual here. So we thought maybe we should call it a manual and say, well, this is not a manual, and when you read this, you should throw it away afterwards, or something like that. But I totally understand as well that these startup projects in Poland and Ukraine, they also want something. I mean, they want to know more, and please let me learn a little bit more about this, because I want to use it for something. So it's a bit arrogant if you just say, oh, you can't write anything down, because it's just something that you need to learn. So of course you can talk about it, even though you can't say there's a manual. But the whole point is that, I mean, the educational idea of Grundtvig is that you can't make a school in advance of the students. In a way, you have to wait for the students to come and see, well, how am I going to do this? Because it has to, in a way, fit their lives. Of course, I definitely think it's a good idea to prepare yourself a little when you are a teacher, but still it has to be a bit dynamic and a bit responsive to the people who come and the lives we are living. So you can't make a manual. Of course you can't, and you can't say, well, this is the one size fits all. But we're working with this kind of publication that isn't a manual, but still is a way of introducing some basic thoughts about, well, what is or what could a folk school be, and that is part of my work to try and work with that. Yeah. I just wanted to kind of end before I want to maybe open for questions or comments, to say that this is where I work. Maybe some of you have been there at Vartov in Copenhagen. It's very much connected to Grundtvig because he was a pastor there for more than 30 years. And the building actually used to be a hospital, or it is called a hospital, but actually I think maybe you should more see for yourself a nursery home or old people's home. And that was where he was a pastor. There's a church in the building. And it wasn't it wasn't a fancy job to be a pastor at that hospital. So maybe that was why he got it, because he was actually in kind of a conflict with the Danish church. So they said, well, okay, let him have Vartov, and then he got Vartov. And they thought, well, maybe he would die very soon because he was very old. And then he was there for 33 years. So I think it's a fantastic story in a way that he just went on and was there as a pastor, but also there as a politician, taking part in the political debates in Denmark, and also taking part in developing this idea about the folk school. And today that place is run by the NGO Grundtvigs Forum, or the Grundtvig Association that I work for, and there's a library there. And I just wanted to make an invitation for you to say, come to Vartov and come to the library. We've just made it an opportunity to come and stay for a couple of weeks, and if you have a Grundtvig or folk school project you want to dig into, then you can come and sit at the library, and it's quite wonderful. And I think it's something that is maybe important, that, when we look at the world, and I think the world has problems. I think it's okay to say the world has problems. And when we look at it, I think one of the things that are important is civil society. That's where I think we should look for empowerment and hope is in the civil society, and also is in the thoughtfulness as well. I think we need to think a lot, and I think we need to look to civil society, because I think there are some problems that are not being solved if we don't kind of stand on our feet. And I think in line of that, I think it's very important to encourage as much as we can projects that are folk school kind of projects. So if there are projects that are if there are people coming who want to start up something like that, I think it's important to encourage that and say, well, how can that be started in your context? And that's what I hope to be part in. But then I thought that is, and I think that's very important. It's not, and maybe also connected to what I tried to say about translation. It's not necessarily a question of going back to the original. So very often when people contact me, I recommend them to contact Eva in Poland, and maybe I could also recommend them to contact John C. Campbell and say, well, this is a place to look for. They're doing it this way, and that's interesting. And I think this kind of connection between these people who are trying to explore this tradition could be something that could develop, maybe, that you could kind of because it's not necessarily going back to the Danish version of it. I think it could also be to, well, they're doing something very interesting in Poland, and they're doing something interesting in Germany and other places. So I think it's important to look for those places. So I thought, and maybe you can tell me about that, and maybe that's why I took this photo as well, that I just took yesterday down at the blacksmith. I think it could be interesting for me to hear if you have the same experience, that people, I know a lot of people come here as a student, but maybe sometimes people also come here because they want to copy the idea anyway, say, well, this is fantastic, maybe I can bring that back home to where I live, and And that is something maybe to develop as well. How can we, even though it is quite a struggle to start up something like this is maybe a long shot, but to start up something on a smaller scale, to say, well, how can we do that, and how can we be an inspiration for that? And I think this place maybe already is, or could be really that kind of place as well. And I think it's also important to say, that's something that I always try to stress, is that there's also something called the invisible folk school. That one thing is going to the school, entering a building. Another thing is things that happen just everywhere, or can happen just everywhere. And I think that's very much the story in Denmark. That one thing is that a lot of people have been to a folk school. A lot of people have, but a lot of people haven't. But they still are inspired by this kind of approach to sing-alongs, eat together, listening to something and discussing it, and this kind of adult education or enlightenment that takes place in many situations, and it doesn't have to, you don't have to have a huge building to do it. And I think that's important as well, that it can be many things, yeah. I think I'll stop now, because maybe you have some questions, and if you don't, we're going to sing a song. But please, if you have any comments or questions.
I just feel about the whole thing of democracy and what that means, like from the Danish point of view, because my mind couldn't settle, like, what is not democracy? And I was writing the word like, is it fascism? Is it Nazism? Because these are all words that are flying around. Communism, monarchy or dictatorship, and I realize I cannot define democracy, which is sort of a sad thing, except it's like, I want you to be free. But then how do you accomplish that? So how does the Denmark model, because it sounds like a lot philosophical, and then my other question is too, is there a lot of humor there? Because the only way I'm getting through, like everything going on in the United States, is laughing. My teachers right now are like, Josh Johnson, funny people. I have to go look for funny things. It's not philosophical so much. But I wondered, is there humor, and how do you define democracy?
Fantastic questions, yeah. I think with democracy, I think the other day I had this book by a person called Hal Koch, who wrote this book after World War II that was called What is Democracy? And his point was to say, well, it's not just a way of ruling a country. And he wanted to say, well, it's a way of living. However, when I walk around talking to people in Denmark, very many people say, well, it's something about voting. It's very much connected to voting. And I think in a way that's a bit problematic, and I think that's, not that it's problematic to vote, it's very important, but if you think of democracy as something about voting, it's too narrow in a way. And I think that was what is interesting about Hal Koch's writing, is that it's a way of living, it's a way of communicating, it's a way of discussing things, and it's a way of being slow as well, because it's really irritating to talk to other people and getting to a result, because it takes so long time. So it's a way of being slow in a way. Of course it's not irritating, but it can be irritating because people have opinions and you have to discuss it over and over. And he was very much focusing on, well, it's a way of living, a way of organizing things that he was saying, well, it's connected to the way you grow up living in community. And also he was, which I think is important as well, that voting is actually maybe that's when you stop talking. So that's when you stop talking, that's when you go and vote. And sometimes I mean, that's just a way of showing who's the biggest. So that's maybe, I mean, that's even not democracy. Of course, it is democracy. I mean, it would be worse if we just started fighting, but it's not in a way, in the sense that that's just finding out, well, what is the majority? But maybe even the majority has a bad idea. So it's a very important point to keep on talking even after the result. And the vote is actually, in a way, a fight, finding out who is biggest. And I think that's interesting to cling to in a way, saying, well, of course, sometimes because you can't talk and talk and talk, so at some point you have to say, well, okay, let's vote. But the important part is not the voting, and it's actually in a way a bit problematic in the sense that what you find out is just who are the biggest number, but not maybe what is the best way to do things. So I think that's very inspiring. I don't know if it's answering your question, but I think there's something interesting there in looking at it as a way of living, and also looking at it as a way of I mean, it's something you need to learn. Not just learn by listening to someone, but learn by doing. I mean, learn by being part of a democratic process and taking part in it. And then the thing about humor, I mean, yeah, definitely, I totally understand. and also, I think, I mean, that's maybe also why, because Grundtvig, sometimes I'm confused whether he has a sense of humor or not. I'm trying to look for it, and sometimes I find it. But he took himself quite seriously. However, there is a focus on joy very much, and that things should be joyful, and also that if people who go to school, they're presented of something that doesn't really inspire them, then, I mean, that's a bad way of doing it. I mean, it has to be motivated by something like, wow, this is interesting, this makes me love it at some point. So it's like, it's connected to a joyful approach to life and also education. So I think joy is an important word, and his way of contrasting at the time this kind of, I mean, at least in some parts, some interpretations of Christianity, you say, well, this life is the hard one, and then you have to wait for the next. And you say, well, no. I mean, there's a connection between the two in a way. So this is the beginning of paradise. When we say, oh, heaven touches earth, or there's a kind of a joyful approach to life. It's maybe not a sense of humor, but still there's something in connection to it, I think. Sorry, that was long. But it was a huge question to answer. Anyone else has a question?
You've been so helpful over the past couple of days and encouraging us to think as what the meaning really is behind the vocabulary that we use fairly freely, I think, in talking about who we are as opposed to or what we be opposed to. Could you help us understand maybe a bit better as to what the living word refers to, and how you understand it, and talk about it to others?
Yeah. Yeah. But the difficult thing is that, and that's the same in Denmark as well, but the difficult thing is that I think Grundtvig was thinking of it in terms of, I mean, for him it was it's a Christian word in a way. I mean, it's connected to Christ in a way, being the living word. And that's kind of part of it, even though he was talking about it also as just using your mouth as a person. But still, in his approach, it was also connected to his his interpretation of Christianity. So there is a connection there, but it's not something that people very often point to in Denmark as well as other places. They focus more on this thing about, I mean, talking freely to each other, opening your mouth, connecting to each other. And sometimes, I mean, I don't always agree with Grundtvig, and this is maybe one of the points, because he's I mean, I think it's maybe inspired also by Romanticism, or that tradition of looking, saying, well, something is real and something is a shadow, and he would say the word of the mouth is real, and then the written word is kind of a shadow. And that's, I mean, there's a tradition of that, having that approach. However, I mean, I'm not sure I agree, actually. And I actually think you can see when you look at Grundtvig's writings that sometimes he's getting ideas by writing. So, of course, it's not like that. So, in a way, I think it's difficult to answer your question, because what does he actually mean? But he means, at least he means that what I was trying to say with reading, that if you can't get anything out of a book if you're not alive. So there's this focus on being connecting to real life, in a way, connecting to experiences, connecting to other people's experiences, and not just something that you take down from the shelves, but something that you experience or connect to by other people's experiences. The reason why I'm sort of babbling here is because it's difficult to answer your question, because it is connected to, I mean, there is a Christian kind of root in it, but the way people use it today is more like, well, it's an equal way of interacting, teacher and student, or community getting together and being there now, and not saying, well, I mean, focusing on the here and now, in a way. Yeah. You don't look very satisfied, I'm sorry.
Was there a question in the back? Did you have a question?
I did. I was trying to write it down. Maybe I can ask you later.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Mel, did you have questions?
He did, it's about you, if that's okay. I'm curious if you attended a folk school growing up, and if you did, what it was like, and if you didn't, what was your path to dedicating a portion of your life to educating people about folk schools in Grundtvig?
Yeah, the embarrassing thing is that I didn't. But I think it's, I mean, for me it has been more, I think, I mean, a lot of things that I've been working with has been this kind of philosophical approach to education. Like, what is it? How do we understand a human being? What kind of approaches to that are included in different approaches to education? And more, and I mean, and I've been there now for 10 years, it's been a way of explaining it by saying the folk school is in a way an example of a real example, an existing example of saying, well, okay, let's skip exams, let's take a different approach, let's do it differently. And of course I've been to many schools and I come there constantly, but I haven't had this long stay. I've pushed my daughters to go in a very free way, pushing them that direction. Yeah, but I haven't myself. And actually I think it's a fantastic thing, the way that, fantastic and hard as well, that the popularity of the folk schools go up and down. I think when I was young it was not a thing, not so much at least. I mean, people went, but a lot of people went. I went to England instead, so I think, but it's never too late. So. but I think, I mean, and that's the thing with, which is also, I mean, I think I talked to somebody last night about, well, the interesting thing about the folk school in Denmark and also Grundtvig is that both of them are connected to, I mean, the kind of the mentality of the Danish people. So everyone knows what it is anyway, and or at least many people will know what it is, and or connect something to it and say, well, it's a symbol of something. And it's also interesting to see, like, the many of the schools, not all of them, but many of the schools in Denmark are quite left-wing. However, the politicians who recommend the schools are quite sort of conservative. And they still do, because it's like, well, this is something that is connected to the Danish identity in a way, which I think is in a way fantastic, that there's this kind of support from the whole sort of political spectrum.
That sounds nice.
It is nice, yes, and also the thing that the schools, I mean, they have to. I mean, it's a law. They have to have their own values. Like, each school should have a set of values that are visible on the webpage, etc. So, and they have to find out themselves with the board deciding what are the values that we base this school on. So it's in a way it's a regulated freedom, because you have to find out what is your profile, and not just saying, well, we do a lot of sports and swimming, but also what is our approach to life in a way? I mean, what are the values that we build on, and that is, I think, is quite good in a way, because then you have really a variety of schools. I mean, some of the schools are quite conservative. Some of the schools are, I mean, there's quite a spectrum as well, and some of the schools are saying, we don't like Grundtvig, and I mean, that's fair enough. So that's really part of it as well, that you have to sort of be visible with your values.
What are some of the values that are different from ours that you've seen?
Well, I mean, some of them are quite, I mean, eccentric in a way. It's like this is a school. I mean, we also have schools that are, like we talked yesterday about competitiveness. I mean, there are schools that are focusing very much on elitist sport and things like that. I mean, there are not very many, because it's most of them kind of in the Grundtvigian line, but that would be a thing as well, and they can do that, because I mean, that's the whole point. You can attract a specific type of people for that, or you can have schools that are conservative Christian in a way that I find difficult to engage with, but I mean, that's something that you have to anyway defend the right to do that, because it's part of this whole idea that you can and it gives problems as well, and it gives some debates as well. Like, we have a debate about how some schools attract very many left-wing young people who just sit there and agree with each other, and then the newspapers write about, oh, this is just for the upper middle class university kids going there and sitting there and feeling very left-wing, and there's a debate about that. I mean, shouldn't this be for the people? What's the whole idea? However, of course, if a school has a certain set of values and topics, it will attract maybe not everyone, but a specific type of people. So it is a bit complicated in that sense, and yeah. Would you like to join me in a song? Yes. Okay. So here's the text. Can you see the text? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to try and sing the first verse, and then maybe I sing it twice, and then you just join in when you feel like it. Please do it as soon as you can. Yeah. Does light shine only from the books? Are those